the rest of this panel. A subject that's already begun to percolate in a number of sessions, a subject that's already begun to record many times, and that's the subject of narrative. We've heard this morning Father Arturo Manuelis mentioned the empty narrative. He powerfully denounced the image of a border which is produced by fear, lies, hatred, racism, in a word, the anti-kingdom for people of faith. A narrative that is predicated on lies, and one that sees migrants, for example, not as agents of their own future or artisans of their own destiny, but as a source of crime, of violence, of chaos, and mayhem, and that sees the border itself as a source of those things. Many of us in this room today are Catholic, Christian, or people of faith. People of faith depend on narratives. People of faith mobilize, utilize, develop, create narratives, metaphors, similes, synecdoches, stories. At the end of the day, people of faith, we people of faith, all we have is stories. Of course, we believe our stories are true. As the great poet Shelley said, the poets are the real unacknowledged legislators of the world. As Christians, we insert ourselves in narratives that are millennia long. We see our lives and our experiences as belonging to a millennia-long history. We connect ourselves to the great histories of the Old Testament, the stories of migrant people, the excluded and exiled people of Israel on a journey back home, or with the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, that great first-century Palestinian who made the journey of migration from the heart of God to our world and back again. Thus, it's these narratives that we as people of faith, as Catholics, as Christians, that we should use, that we do use to interpret our border. Now, there are other narratives, of course. There are alternative narratives. You don't have to see it through those lenses. There are others who mobilize alternative narratives. A national security narrative, for example, that sees the other as an enemy or just a potential threat. A national security narrative which results in the exclusion of a vital, alive border and turns it into no more than a prophylactic, a barrier to keep out the other, to keep the saved in, to keep the damned out. Or a slightly, though tricky improvement, a slight or rather tricky improvement is the sight of trade and commerce that binds people together. It's a happier narrative, to be sure, but it also too has a dark underside. It has an underbelly because it's predicated in large part on inequality. And we can see that from our homes in El Paso as we look over to the homes yards away into that quarters. We can witness the wage slavery of those in quarters, labor and toil in maquilas, to produce all sorts of market delights, the so-called first world. Both of these narratives are exogenous. They don't come from the border. They come from faraway places. They come from Austin or Chihuahua. They come from Washington, D.C. or Mexico City. They're not the narratives which the people of the border utilize. There is a better way. To quote an Argentinian poet in this age of Francis, the wind blows from the south. I'll talk about that a little more later. But in this age of Francis, witness how Pope Francis mobilized a different narrative even in the speech of Congress just a week ago. In his speech to Congress, he mobilized a different way of seeing the United States. Can you hear me back there? Anyone hear me? He mobilized different narratives. First, he introduced himself as the son of migrants. We're very hostile and anti-migrant Congress. Then he introduced himself quite boldly as an American among Americans, an Argentinian in the United States Congress, presenting himself as an American among Americans. Speaking Spanish from the balcony of the U.S. Congress, he mobilized very different narratives in his discourse. There are alternatives. There are different ways. The wind blows from the south. I'm the executive director of the Hope Border Institute, and we do believe that another border narrative is possible. In fact, we believe that another border narrative already exists. It exists in the people, in the customs, in the traditions, in the faith of the people who live on the border, who die on the border, who love on the border. Our mission is as an advocacy and education organization to develop a response to the historical reality of the border by providing an alternative narrative, by drawing on the Christian narratives of justice and peace, of equality, of mercy, that draws on the imagination and creativity indigenous to this community to advance a different narrative, to advance a future, a better future for the residents of this border. I want to present two people who will speak to us about narrative today, about developing an alternative narrative. First, Fernando Garcia, who, as you know, is the executive director, the founding director of the Border Network for Human Rights. He's on triple duty today, so he's already been introduced. And Ralph McLeod, the director of the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. Ralph McLeod is the director of the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, works at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops in Washington, D.C. He's been the president of the National Association of Black Catholic Administrators, board member of the National Black Catholic Congress, the Roundtable Association of Social Action Directors. He served 4 terms on the Fort Worth City Council, and 3 terms as mayor pro tempore. He chaired the County Homeless Commission and was named Tarrant County's first racial reconciliation award winner by the Tarrant County Community of Churches. Mr. McLeod is also the recipient of the State of Texas Courage Award from the Texas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. And in 2009, he was awarded the History Maker Award from the Archdiocese of Atlanta, and Catholic Charity USA's Martin Luther King Keep the Dream Alive Award in 2010. Both of these individuals have been involved in creating a different narrative for our border and for our country. So I'd like to invite them to speak. And then I'll come back and offer a little bit of a theological interpretation of the work that the Border Institute is trying to achieve on the border. So please welcome Fernando and Ralph.
De nuevo, buenas tardes, good afternoon again. Before we start, I think we have a PowerPoint presentation that I might not be paying attention to. Let's move to the next slide. Just keep moving however you feel convenient. The first thing, before I talk about narratives, because this is extremely important for us, I would like to talk about where I'm coming from, where Border Network is coming from, and what are part of our realities that actually are pushing us to talk about new and alternative narratives. The first thing that I need to say is I don't represent myself. I do represent hundreds of families that are members of the Border Network for Human Rights. At least 800 families in southern New Mexico and in the Paso area. And you actually met at least 120 of them last night, if you were here. And today we have our community council, which actually has been throughout the whole day being with us. And that community council represents those regions of the border where we work. So I would like to recognize our members of the community council. Los compañeros miembros del Consejo Comunitario de la Red pueden pararse, por favor. I need to tell you that Border Network it is, if you can consider Border Network something, we are a human rights grassroots organization with a national vision. And that's where we aim, because the issues that we're working here at the border, unfortunately, cannot be resolved here. They need to resolve, I would say in Washington, but actually more than that, they need to be resolved in the rest of the country. If that was the case, if the country were El Paso in southern New Mexico, would have passed immigration reform 10 years ago. We have Border Network function has a democratic structure. Whatever is decided, whatever we present in terms of campaigns and policies comes from our communities that gather very often to define those priorities. We have emphasized a lot of our work in community leadership development. That means that the majority are community council, the vast majority of our staff, and the majority of the board of directors are community members, and they have developed from those experiences of organizing at the border. So that is a little bit of Border Network. I would like to say that basically Border Network has built a platform to have an organized response to abuse of authority, which is a major issue here at the border. The human rights violations, lack of accountability, discrimination, racism, and on and on. And we use what we call a defensive strategy. When I say defensive, it's denounce, push back, really talking about the problems that we have and having an education about the problem. But proactive strategy means for us that we need to create our own solutions. And I think that is a key when we talk about new narratives. Because sometimes we become, I would say, experts, professionals in describing problems. I mean, if you want me, I can talk the whole afternoon about how many problems we have at the border. But when somebody asks us, what are your vision, your solutions, how would you do it differently? That is what we don't talk too much about. Building a new narrative means that we need to create our own vision, our own platform. And that vision and that platform comes from the communities that we work with. You saw Congressman Beto O'Rourke and Congressman Pierce presenting a legislation. Well, that legislation was born in those communities. That is a proactive vision. We are not waiting just to denounce the abuse, but we don't want the abuse to happen at all in our border region. So I think that is the end goal of our process. But yes, I'm going to talk about the massive border infrastructure and militarization in a minute. Just want to give you a glance of what Beto was talking about. But I just want to demonstrate the risk of false narratives and the impacts of a false, distorted narrative. In the last 10 years, I would say in the last 20 years, there's people out there saying that our communities at the border are in chaos, mayhem, full of violence for political reasons that do not represent the reality of the border. Beto said that Paso is safer, potentially safer than any of the cities you come from. However, we still have a debate in Texas. Actually, not only a debate, a policy now that is sending state troopers, state border patrol to the border. Because they believe that there are car bombs exploding in downtown El Paso. Do you know who said that? Can you imagine who said that there was a car bomb exploding in downtown El Paso? Any guess? Governor Perry. There was, no, that something happened like that in Juarez, but it never happened in El Paso. However, that was the argument to bring state troopers to the border. Now we had, I mean, Trump is not the only one saying all these stupid things about the border. He's the one that is taking it to the stream with all of the cameras around. But there's been a narrative out there that the border is quite open, that nothing has been done in the last 10 years. That nothing, like people is coming, criminals are coming, Mexicans are coming, raping our children, and women. That is a narrative that is not new, however it's full of prejudice, racism, but it's impacting policy. Based on those narratives, we have built false policies. We have actually built false infrastructures that actually do not represent the reality of the border. And let me give you just a glance what we have built at the border based on false and artificial narratives. The first thing that is there, and you saw it already, is that at least every year $18 billion are being spent at the border. In the border, but only the border patrol budget, it is higher than the combined budget of the FBI, ATF, EA, Marshal, Secret Service, all of that federal agencies combined. They don't actually get what Border Patrol is having to do this work. Based on this, again, in your mind you need to be thinking what they are fighting for, what are these policies for? From 2007 to 2012, we went from 14,000 agents to 21,000 agents at the border based on a false narrative. Walls and fencing. All of these numbers are from 2000 to 2014. Primary fence, 50 miles to 352 miles. Secondary fence from 10 miles to 36 miles. Vehicle fence, 10 miles to almost 300 miles. Total fence, 77 miles to 700 miles. You know, there's a picture somewhere in the internet, you can find it, where there's a vehicle across the fence, going across the fence. So this is a futile effort. We continue with militarization. Roads from 70 miles to 145 miles, lighting for 20 miles to 70 miles, underground sensors, we didn't have none, now we have 11, almost 12,000 sensors, aircrafts from 56 to 107, unmanned vehicles, drones from 0 to 8 systems. The same drones that are in Afghanistan, we have deployed them at the border. Vessels, from 2 vessels to 84 vessels, to surveillance systems, mobile surveillance systems, from 1 to 40, video surveillance systems with none to 178, remote video systems 140 to 273, night vision goggles for almost 10,000, thermal imaging capabilities 600, and on and on. I can continue telling you what we are doing at the border. Would you believe me if I tell you that this is becoming one of the most militarized borders in the world? Where our friend, our neighbor, country, we are not at war with. It is not hostile. However, we have decided in the country that calls for democracy, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, we have decided to militarize an area of our soil. And who is the enemy here? Can you tell us who is the enemy? Can Trump tell you who is the enemy? I think he can tell you very clearly who is the enemy. Mexicans. Also, as a part of this enforcement, Since 2007, probably this number is a little bit not updated, but there's 1,300 people detained daily at the border. And probably that is diminishing. Also, we end up a number of programs that actually would actually stop somebody and then release them. That is gone. That doesn't happen anymore. Now we have a system that criminalizes people. If you're stopped and you come across, you now are a criminal and you were treated as such and you would be deported with a criminal offense. So what is what we're doing to change that? I think we're going to take a little bit more than 3 minutes because that's what I have remaining. Is that okay if I take more 5 minutes? Okay. It is that obviously we're doing what traditionally we're doing with other organizations. We're building alliances. We have developed a communication program with a new narrative. We're going to talk about that. And we had a number of policy development strategies, such as introduction of the border bill. But nothing that we do is going to be effective if we don't change the way that we are talking about the border, in the way that people perceive the border. And I believe it is not only Trump. I think there are good people. There are good people in the interior that believe that this is the situation, because that's the only thing that they've heard. So I think our challenge is to actually talk about the border and about enforcement in a different way. We're not going to go fast tracking on this. The first thing in terms of the border network, as we see the narrative, is enforcement. In the challenges that we have at the border, we want to see them as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to rethink border enforcement. This is a great opportunity to talk about how enforcement should be and what is the enforcement that is acceptable for us. We say that it should be an enforcement that should be infused with American human rights values. We believe that it should be an enforcement that is accountable, focused, and effective. And we believe that enforcement should respect rights of community and families. All of this to say that there's a basic premise of border network, that we are not anti-enforcement. We're not against enforcement. We're not saying disappear the border right now. I mean, we're very pragmatic. Ideally, someday we would like to see a world without borders. Yes, but we cannot have an alternative right now telling people in the United States to disappear the border. So we don't see the Border Patrol as the evil enemy necessarily. We see policies being developed in Washington as ill-conceived policies. Also, border network promotes dialogue and pressure. But what that means, that strategy for us is, if you want to change something, you need to talk, and you need to engage. And you need to talk and engage and have a dialogue. And have a dialogue with whom? With members of Congress, with Border Patrol, with police departments. And pressure them from a community perspective. The community should pressure them to engage in a dialogue that is going to promote solutions. We believe at the end that we should have a border where people cross legally, orderly, and without violence, and with respect to their rights. So those are important premises for us. I would say that now how we wrap up our vision of the border is that we believe that we're at the time that we need to go from quantity to quality in terms of enforcement. It for us means that yes, indeed, we need to engage in the national security debate. And we need to say, yes, that national security would only be possible with the inclusion of communities at the border and in the interior. You will not have national security, you will not achieve national security if those communities are not involved. We need to say that enforcement must be focused on real threats. Yes, there are threats. There are. We're not ignoring them. And they should focus on that. Immigrant families are not the threat in the United States. We need to delink And this is very important. Decriminalize immigration. What that means for us is that we cannot put in the same box the drug dealer, the potential subjective terrorist, and an immigrant family in the same box, and measure them with the same law. We cannot do that. And that is very convenient, because then everybody can convolute the debate and say, well, we're setting this because national security threats. Tell us, who are the threats? Are immigrant workers the threats? At the end of the day, we believe that immigrants are part of the solution, and that immigrants and border residents are essential to keep the border safe and protected. El Paso and New Mexico have a model of engagement that actually is an example for that. We also should question the fiscal responsibility of the border policies. There are programs that do not work. Again, you're just throwing money there. Just an example, $800 million for the next 4 years to have 200, 300 state troopers doing the work of border patrol in the Texas border. They are irrelevant. They are not going to accomplish anything, but they're going to stop immigrants, Hispanics, Latinos, and that is going to be the accomplishment of that. We need to put more resources at the port of entry. I think that is being mentioned, and we need to actually have more engagement programs. A major and a key element that we want to infuse to the enforcement strategy, which is an American value, by the way, it is what we call accountability and oversight. We have been asking for accountability for the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, for accountability for the banking system. We need to ask for accountability and oversight of the largest enforcement operations in the nation, which is at the border. And right now we don't have a single independent accountability mechanism, oversight mechanism, to what I've been talking about. Finally, I would actually say that for us, especially the border residents, this idea of civil rights and human rights at the border becomes a call to action. Because what is happening here, in this exceptional area of 200 miles from the border, is something that you might not be willing to accept in Chicago, or in Los Angeles, or New York, where it seems that constitutional rights do not exist. So you have millions of people living in an area where if law enforcement enter into your property, into your houses, that seems legal. If law enforcement stop you for no reason, that seems constitutional legal. If they kill you, shot you while you are crossing the border, a judge is going to tell you that nothing wrong was done by that border patrol agent, and that agent is not going to be accountable. So we believe that constitutional rights do apply to the border, that the civil rights and human rights framework is our most important framework to organize communities. Finally, immigration reform. Immigration reform, the way that is being talked about, cannot ignore border enforcement reform and border enforcement accountability. And it's so easy to say, well, we're going to legalize 11 million people, but we're going to set more militarization to the border. And what you're doing when you think like that is that you're sacrificing one community for the other, and that is not a human rights value, and by any means that is not a Catholic value. With that, I will close and thank you for listening.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Someone asked me if I was going to do my presentation in Spanish. And up until last week, I was really proud of my Spanish speaking skills. I thought I was pretty good and somewhat bilingual when I really needed to be. but I got deflated last week. Let me explain a little bit why. A couple of months ago, they asked me if I might be one of the ones who might greet the Holy Father, greet Pope Francis when he came. And for 2 months, I was so excited, and I had 2 months to practice the phrase that I was going to use when I met Pope Francis. And I practiced it day after day after day after day after day. And when I finally had an opportunity to make that very, very, very lifetime moment of shaking Pope Francis's hand, I shook his hand and said, "Gracias, Paso, ecumenical pobres." And I was so proud of that. And he said, "Thank you for your work in English," which I think he got the impression that maybe Spanish wasn't my first language. But at any rate, still a tremendous experience nonetheless. I want to have this opportunity to thank folks who CCHD has had an opportunity to partner with in this work over the years. I mean, it's been a tremendous joy to witness your resilience, your tenacity, your faith in a way that's been wonderfully, wonderfully powerful, and know that lives have been changed and affected in a very, very positive way by your work at CCHD. And on behalf of the bishops, I'd like to thank you for that, because we know that the money in many ways is the easy part. The part that you all do on a day-to-day basis is something that you can pay for, and it's something that is very, very powerful and effective. So thank you for what you do. And thank the planners, the folks who have planned this gathering together, of tremendous folks and who labored for quite a while and realized the importance of what this work is about. I thought in the short period of time that we have here together that I'd do three things. First, I'd say a little bit about who we are at CCHD, a little bit about what we, a little bit about, how's this? Better? Better? I think my Spanish, this one. A little bit about who we are, a little bit about what we do, and finally just a little bit about where I hope that we might be going as an organization, and certainly we are very dependent on your help and insights as we make as we travel down that road. First, who we are. Monsignor Manuelis this morning talked about we are the other. And when I think about the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, I think of an African proverb that says, I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am. I exist because my community exists, and my community exists because I exist. The Catholic Campaign for Human Development has spent the last 45 years or so concerned with what's happening on the margins, being very, very deliberate about going to the margins, being very, very deliberate about creating new narratives as it relates to people who are struggling, being very, very deliberate about making sure that those voices are the ones that are heard, that make the determinations about what they're going to do to help pull themselves out of those struggles. When the bishops came together some 45 years ago, they were very deliberate about what the name of the organization was going to be. And I'm reminded of my colleague and friend Kate Dorset, who's here, very fortunate to be able to work with. She talks about how the bishops, while she wasn't there, she talks about how the bishops had a very, very, very difficult time in what the organization was going to be named. But they were very, very clear they wanted it to be human development. That humans need to be developed in all of the ways of leadership development in terms of how they would interact with their communities. That they would be developed in a way that they might be able to live up to the dignity that God wants all of us to live up to. So the campaign for human development was formed at that time. It was very, very deliberate that it was a campaign for human development, not the Catholic campaign for human development at that time, because they wanted to make sure that folks understood that this particular struggle, who had the I'm about to take this personally. But they wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a Catholic organization, they were concerned about everyone who found themselves in that struggle. Several years later they came back and said, we want folks to know that these are Catholics who are concerned. So they added the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, and hence we were born. In terms of what we do, when we're at our best, I like to say that we take Pope Francis's words and his challenges very, very seriously. That we encourage encounter and we facilitate dialogue because of that encounter. We encourage encounter of people who come together who would not come together for any other reason, because of their faith, because of their shared interests, because of a recognition of their shared humanity and working on specific problems. And in doing that shared encounter, that shared dialogue, that new narratives are born. New narratives are born in a way that wouldn't exist absent those kinds of encounters, absent those kinds of dialogue. I'm reminded this afternoon of a story that just illustrates that in a way, that of Miss Jackson. Miss Jackson was a retired educator who was tenacious in the way that she worked on behalf of the poor. And I asked her that now that you're retired, now would be a good time for you to relax and kick your feet up and do those kinds of things. And I said, why is it that you are as tenacious and dedicated and committed as what you are? And she told me about a young person. Her story told me a story about a young person named Enrique, who came to school in the 6th grade, started the school where she worked when he was 6 years old. Started school when he was 6 years old without any kind of pre-K, so he was a little bit behind when he got there. Enrique struggled 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. Enrique had these chronic ear infections, as she recalled. And she would have them for 3rd and 4th grade, and his parents would medicate him, but they would never take him to the doctor because they were immigrants, and they were afraid of being detected, and plus they couldn't take off work. So they would medicate him at home, but those infections caused him such difficulty at school, he got further and further and further behind. And when he got to the 8th grade, she knew he was getting in trouble, but he was passing, just barely passing, and went on to high school, she lost track of him. The next time she found out anything about him, she found out that he had killed 2 people. And she found out earlier from talking to his high school teachers that he had become a problem because he wasn't learning, he was behind. And she said she got involved because she could not help but wonder. She could not help but wonder what would have happened if the school system had intervened. She could not wonder what would happen if some of the neighbors in that community where Enrique lived would have intervened. She could not help but wonder what the healthcare system was, a system that would have had an outreach that would realize that this young man was struggling the way that he would. And she realized that in all of these institutions and organizations, she had had a hand in. She had, and she admits and felt very, very guilty about the neglect that she said that she did not reach out in a way that was very, very positive to help. She said she could have helped out in the school system. She could have helped out to make sure that he got, penicillin or amoxicillin or whatever it is to cure a very, 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 in a very real way, a very simple illness, an ailment that might have changed the way that this whole outcome happened. So the community was hurt and harmed because of that. And she said that she was not going to, she could do everything that she can because she has blessed to be able to have an opportunity to circle back and make sure that this doesn't happen to any other community, that this doesn't happen to any other child, that this doesn't happen to any other families. And so she did everything that she could. So we fund, we assist, we support organizing groups. Over the years, we've probably done somewhere there 4,000 of them. And we help people, young people, old people, elderly people, work on things like public safety and education and employment. We fund worker centers and immigrant rights efforts. And we deal with organizations who are dealing right now with high incarceration rates among people of color. Just a moment to it and talk a little bit about where we hope to go, where we'd like to go, given this Francis moment that we find ourselves in. I would hope that we become better at listening to everybody, to people who are on the margins, but listening also to people who are subject matter experts who might be able to help us do our work. That we might be able to open more field hospitals or fund more organizations that are out there doing the work. Right now we fund somewhere near 230 organizations around the country who are doing tremendous work, but there obviously needs to be so much more of that. I'd like to see how we open organizations of field hospitals of healing and hope. And it's an opportunity for us to stretch ourselves to create new narratives that can lift up the human spirit in a way that no one would be able to say that they are better or worse than anyone else. We want to change the narrative that reminds us as looking around the room that very few of us who are gathered here this afternoon will remember the images of 50 years ago where buses were going from one portion of the country that were being attacked by people who did not want to acknowledge that they shared the same human dignity that they had. Very few of us remember that. That was 50 years ago, but all of us remember a year ago when we saw those same images of people who wanted nothing else but a better life for themselves and their families, who were being attacked in buses and being brutalized and being negatively talked about and being really dismissed as not being made in the image and likeness of God. We remember those. And I think the Catholic Campaign for Human Development is out to do what we can to create a new narrative and based on encounters and dialogue of ways we can come together and have serious conversations. We want to continue to have a conversation that Sister Norma talked about this morning and help do what we can to find out what human dignity is, compromised and challenged, to restore it. And remember that, and do what we can to remind folks that despite differences of race and creed and religion or income levels, or even borders, that all of us made in the image and likeness of God are required to have that image and likeness of God in a way that we can manifest it in a way to its fullest. And it doesn't matter of race or creed or even something as nonsensical as a borderline that man-made. It's tough work. I realize it is extremely tough work, and I know that you guys in the choir, I'm speaking to those who understand that. But given the polarization that we face, the polarization that we see, the lack of love, the hard-heartedness of folks that we find ourselves who just don't want to see or hear a new narrative, I think that should inspire us and encourage us to do even more. I'm reminded of another African proverb that says that calm seas does not make skillful sailors. And that African proverb, I think, is somewhat reminiscent of another story, gospel story of Jesus in the boat, who took a nap, and all of the persons in the boat with him, the disciples, who, because of their fear, but they had just enough faith to realize that Jesus could do something if we woke him up. And I think as we do this work, that we have to realize that we have just enough faith based on the way that Jesus has calmed the seas for us in years past. Just enough faith to realize that he can come to our assistance, that he can come to our assistance when we find ourselves in difficult situations and help us to move over this hurdle and to share some of the wonderful experiences. And because of our witness, that in and of itself creates a new dialogue. And I'll stop there and allow everyone to go to the next portion.
So just quickly a couple of thoughts about what people of faith can bring to this conversation about building a new narrative, advancing an effective narrative here on the border. And I realized as I was coming up with my thoughts that my thoughts were quite boring, and after viewing the coverage of the Pope, and all you have to do is say Pope Francis in an audience like this thing and go rah rah rah. I just take a couple ideas from Pope Francis, and so that's what I want to do. I think that there are some ideas of Pope Francis for who he is, his biography, his story, his lessons, his teaching, his just who he is as a Latin American archbishop, as a Latin American priest, as a Jesuit, and as the first Latin American Pope. There are some powerful lessons that we can bring from his experience to this border, because he defines himself as a pope of the peripheries. He defines himself as a pope of the margins. He wants a church that's on the margins. He wants a church that's dedicated to those who are living on the peripheries. And those insights aren't spontaneous. They didn't come to him just because he was elected pope. They have to do with his biography. They have to do with the fact that he's a Latino. They have to do with the fact that he's the first Latino pope. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that. A lot of people think Pope Francis, because he talks off the cuff all the time, and he says a lot of silly things sometimes, that he's like the Joe Biden of the Catholic Church. That's not true. Pope Francis is really smart. He's not, when he says a lot of the things that shock us, and that push us, and that challenge us, and that stretch us a little bit, it's not because he's just shooting from the hip or speaking off the cuff. He's saying things that he's really thought through and that are the result of mature experience that are the result of a long history of being a pastor in a great Latin American city, metropolis like Buenos Aires. And they're not just spontaneous, shoot from the hip remarks from an old, nice uncle or grandfather type guy. This is a man who has a lot to teach us, and it's important that we listen. So as we think about what people of faith can bring to the conversation about how to advance an effective border narrative, there are a few lessons I want to talk about that I think Pope Francis brings us. First is understanding the church. As I said, he's the first Latin American Pope, and there's a historical significance there. A historical significance in him being the first Latin American Pope. Pope Francis, when he was a Jesuit and then as a bishop, often talked about this concept of a source church and a receiving church. Raise your hand if you've heard about that. Nobody, good. One person, good. What does that mean? It means that in every age, in every time in history, in every age in history, there's one part of the church which is giving vitality to the universal church, which is giving energy and direction to different parts of the church. So in the early church, for example, it was Jerusalem, Antioch, and the church in North Africa. Or during the Reformation period, it was the church in Italy or Spain. Or during the Second Vatican Council, it was Germany or France. But in the 20th century, the Latin church, La Iglesia Latina, comes to full maturity. In the 50s, the bishops' conference, the bishops produced this Latin American conference called CELAM. And CELAM at Puebla and Medellin comes up with these key concepts: the preferential option for the poor, the priority for the poor, that sound like crazy Latino things. The rest of the church just isn't listening. But poco a poco, these ideas that we need to put the poor at the center, that the periphery has something to say to the center, that the margins are important, they become part of the vocabulary and the lexicon of the ordinary Catholic Church. And that's a gift of the Latino Church to the universal church. And so Pope Francis, even when he was a Jesuit, even when he was an archbishop, he really believed this. He was convinced that the European church, perhaps even the American church, they were no longer the source churches. They were no longer the sources of energy for the world global church. But that baton was being passed to the Latino church. And what were the lessons that the Latino church had to offer? The lessons were that those on the margins have something to say to us, and something to say that's very important. That the church on the margins has something to say to the universal church. That the poor, those who are in poverty, those who are experiencing injustice, they have something to say to the rest of us. And that's true in the church, but it's also true in society. And there's a political corollary to that. Pope Francis, when he went to Congress and identified himself as an American, he was doing it because he was inserting himself into a narrative that was greater than himself, that was greater than the United States narrative, that was greater than a border narrative. It was an American narrative. Pope Francis believes that the church really has some important, instrumental, special role in catalyzing the integration, an important word for our conference this week, right? The integration of all of the Americas, and that the Latino experience, the migrant experience, the experience of those on the margin has a lot to do with catalyzing that. There's a historical vocation for the Latino church. And we are on the border. We are inheritors of that great legacy, of the option for the poor, of paying attention to the margin, of being on the periphery. If the border, la frontera, no es una periferia, where is the border? Where is the periphery? We are the margins. The margins are not places that have to receive and be the victims of narratives that are imposed on them, but the margins, la periferia, la frontera, can actually be the place where the future is revealed. It can actually offer something to the rest of the country, to the rest of the continent. And that's the great promise of La Frontera. And that's the gift that people of faith can bring to the discussion of a new narrative. Paying attention to people on the margins, the poor and their experiences and their aspirations and their creativity and their imagination actually have a role in shaping a new narrative. Do we believe that? Are we convinced of that as Catholics? Are we convinced of that as citizens of the Frontera? Or do we slowly, poco a poco, absorb the lie that this is a place of chaos and mayhem and has nothing to offer the rest of the country? It's simply a pawn in the narratives of others that are driven by petty and partisan and narrow political discourses. Do we believe that? So, those are just a couple lessons from Pope Francis that I really believe have something to offer the rest of the church. It was the Latino American church before Pope Francis that was even Pope, the Aparecida. We heard about Aparecida this morning. Cardinal Bergoglio, Pope Francis, he presided over Aparecida, which was the latest reunion of the Latin American bishops, la quinta reunión, el quinto congreso de los obispos latinoamericanos. It was there that we heard in the final document from the Latino American bishops, presided over by Cardinal Bergoglio, who became Pope Francis, that we first heard about the sobrantes, the leftovers in society, that we heard about the cultura del descarte, that we heard about las periferias existenciales, that the church had to go to the periferias existenciales and to make the poor the center of its ministry, and the policymakers should put the needs and priorities of the poor and vulnerable at the center of public policy. That was a gift of the Latin American church that God brought to the center in Pope Francis. And so Pope Francis privileges the margins. He privileges the periphery. He privileges la frontera. He believes that this is the place that will really determine the future of our country, how we treat the other, how we treat each other. This is the place that will determine that. Do we believe that? So we need to deepen our religious and political cartography. No longer left, right, no longer top, down, top, bottom. Pope Francis is no look in terms of the margins, the periferia, exclusion and inclusion. He breaks the political categories of right and left, of conservative and liberal, because he puts in front of us the needs and priorities of the poor and asks us to look at reality, to look at church, to look at public policy in terms of exclusion and inclusion. That's a completely different political, religious, spiritual cartography. And as a church, as people who are interested in public policy, as people who are interested in building community, we need to take those concepts seriously, take them to heart, and ask ourselves if we really believe it or if we've been convinced by the lies of the false narratives. We want to leave some time for questions, but before we go to questions, what we wanted to do is just take a moment, if you would take 30 seconds and think, what does a border, what does a frontera built from the ground up, built from the perspective of those who are in poverty look like? Do we believe it's possible? How do we do it? How do we create resonance across the luchas, the different struggles are across our border? From San Diego, Tijuana to Brownfield, McAllen, Matamoros. How do we create resonance? How do we build a border from the bottom up? Take a minute to think about that. And then turn to the person next to you and talk about it. And then we'll start a dialogue. Does that make sense? Okay. or stimulus de dialogue que tenemos en el diálogo. Padre.
Thank you for sharing and inspiring us. I just want to call attention to the new narrative that was created by the bishops jointly of North America and South America with their document, Strangers No More. There's a new narrative in part, Strangers No More.
Well, I want to put out something that it derives from all three presentations in this session. I was very struck by talking about the importance of narratives and new narratives. And so that presents to the panelists and to, I guess, everybody in this room a challenge, which is how do we propagate that narrative, or how do we extend that narrative, or how do we make that narrative reach and become a dialogue and become more inclusive and so forth. And I did want to pick up one thread in the Voter Network presentation, which had many, many important insights and lessons. And one of many of them was this line about the combination of dialogue and pressure. Not just dialogue as in, you know, we're pitiful, take pity on us, and not just pressure as in we're angry and confrontational, but that combination of dialogue and pressure. So maybe we can elaborate a little bit on that, or any other strategies, ideas that people in the panel and in the session have about how to bring forward this narrative project.
I invite members of here to offer a word.
Well, for us, it was revealing the fact that we were doing our advocacy work with many friends along the border at that time. And we saw that there were major challenges in terms of national policy. And we saw that the enormous task to change policy in Washington, to have a new legislation, even to change some administrative procedures in Washington. So at that time, we were struggling to actually put together national policy recommendations. And what we'll do in that, the things in the ground were not getting better. So we were spending too much time engaging nationally, which I think was good, to actually educate members of Congress. We organized multiple trips to Washington, D.C. Every year we have like 2 or 3 delegations on the border. But we saw that we were doing that, and that was going very slowly. Well, here in our front yard, inside our house, and in our backyard, we were having all of these problems of local law enforcement enforcing immigration laws, police officers acting as immigration agents, border patrol agents going beyond and above their constitutional responsibilities, violating rights. So we had to take a decision at that time. And we took that decision with our community. I think this process of dialogue and pressure would not work if you don't have an organized community. So we took the decision to take on and to challenge the current local narratives. That it was okay for local police officers to enforce immigration laws, that it was okay that Border Patrol had all of these powers to actually violate people. So we challenged that, and we started telling the stories, telling testimonials, and we were publishing that. We were actually having conferences, press conferences, we're having some mobilizations to put together a community response to that reality, to that narrative. And I remember that the first time that we collected first documentation campaign in 2001, we collected like 150 cases of violations, with 70% of them coming from Border Patrol, gross violations. So what we decided at that time, instead of just releasing a report, we organized a community event. And we released the report as a part of a community event, telling a different story. The story was that indeed Border Patrol was violating rights of border residents. And it was striking that made it to the front page of the Paso Times. That never happened before. I mean, there were some coverage by Spanish-speaking media, televisión, Univision and Telemundo. But in this case, a community event, a community reaction, not just only a few activists or advocates, but hundreds of people coming and saying that story. Actually, that is what changed the narrative locally. So the next day, we received the call from the Border Patrol, from the chief of the Border Patrol. They invited us for a meeting. That's something that never happened. We actually were calling for meetings, we're asking for meetings, and they never had time. And I think it's because they consider most of us at that time loony-toony leftist organizations that wanted to put a bad name on Border Patrol. But they couldn't do that with our organized communities anymore. So we went to the meeting, few of us, and it was the Border Patrol chief, it was all of the lawyers and agents and supervisors in that meeting, and he raised the Paso Times and said, why you didn't come to us first? We responded, we tried many times, but we didn't consider this relevant. So at that time, two things happened. In that meeting, we started the dialogue. I mean, there was a pressure, a community pressure, organized community pressure. And then we started a dialogue that continues today. And that dialogue actually had to provide major changes in the practices. In 2010, when we launched the same documentation campaign with more people, only 30% of the abuses were on Border Patrol. So there was a dramatic reduction. What we did there, we actually engaged in this ongoing dialogue through community forums with Border Patrol, cross-training of agents and promotores, assessments of the strategies locally. So at the end of the day, we have what we consider a very successful engagement model that has reduced dramatically the incidence of abuses in this region, while we cannot change policy nationally. So I have to say that this is not the reality for the rest of the border. This is not happening in San Diego or Arizona or the Texas Valley. We believe that what changed, what allowed this engagement was this change of narratives coming from communities. The first narrative is not accepting that an abuse was okay. That the second important piece of the narrative is that we didn't consider Border Patrol at the end of the day as an enemy to we could engage and have a dialogue with them. So I think it is an example for us to work with them, work with the local sheriff, the local police. You're going to have later on the sheriff of El Paso talking about this. This was not the reality 10 years ago. It was very different. So it worked for us, this idea of dialogue and pressure.
One thing I would say in terms of promulgating a new narrative is to have a two-pronged approach, that you denounce the old narrative and to announce the new narrative. And then to do it with a persistence that acknowledges that there will be buts. Because for folk who are critical in a negative way, of the new narrative, they're going to be able to try to cite reasons why there should not be a new narrative. And you have to be prepared to respond in a way that, that the new narrative is not this, and the new narrative is one. And as challenging as it may be to challenge those folks who are critical in a negative way and who want to stick with the old narrative, I mean, to approach them with a degree of love, compassion, and understanding, I think may be one approach. But I think the persistence of knowing that the true new narrative is something that's true and real and something that you want to make sure is understood in a very persistent way and stay on top of it would be my advice.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Miguel Miranda de la Red Fronteriza de Derechos Humanos en el este de la ciudad. Gracias por venir y estar ahí, oírnos con atención. Yo diría que para tener éxito tenemos que estar unidos todos completamente. Iglesias católicas y también cristianas. ¿Por qué? Porque es un valor moral de salvar aquí a nuestra gente y hacerlas que vivan una vida digna. Gracias por venir y es mi comentario. Muy amable.
Gracias.
Sister, did you have a question or comment? Look. Okay, if there's no other comments or questions, I think we're good. Thank you to our Ralph and to Fernando and to all of you.